Welcome to More Non-Dues Revenue, a series of Zoominars sponsored by Chamber Marketing Partners, where we interview Chamber of Commerce visionaries and discuss their creative, entrepreneurial strategies for generating non-dues revenue. I'm Ed Burzminski, President of Chamber Marketing Partners. Now let's get started. Our guest today is Cheryl Viola, Executive Director of the Jerome Chamber of Commerce in Jerome, Idaho. Cheryl came to the Jerome Chamber in March 2018, specifically to provide membership growth, drive non-dues revenue, develop and introduce new programs to enhance benefits, and help rebuild the image of the Chamber within the community through a variety of initiatives. Prior to her work at the Jerome Chamber, Cheryl was Executive Director at the Dickinson Area Chamber in North Dakota. Ooh, she likes the cold climates. Cheryl holds an MBA in marketing from North Central University, and we're excited to have Cheryl with us on the More Non-Dues Revenue Zoominar. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I do want to share something with you about Cheryl. Cheryl is an amazing early morning riser. She is at the gym at 3:45 every morning. Cheryl, can you tell us a little bit about why you do that?
Um, it actually stems from it's only time in my schedule with kids and stuff like that I make it work. But I actually went on a very big weight loss journey about 10 years ago. And so very motivated, and I'm actually there 6 days a week. Saturdays, I'm not there quite as early, and Sundays are my day off.
What was the end result of your weight loss? How much did you lose?
Over 150 pounds.
Wow, that is amazing. Now that's dedication and that's commitment, and that is going on a journey. So let's jump right in. Cheryl, what's your chamber like? And how many members do you have? How many staff? What's your community like and things like that? Tell us about that.
Jerome is a small bedroom community about 10 miles west of Twin Falls, Idaho. We are just over 10,000 people in population, and we currently have 172 members, as I just picked up a brand new member about an hour ago. As far as staff goes, it's just me. Staff of one. I've got 10 board members and about 22 active chamber ambassadors.
Staff of one.
Staff of one. It's just me.
What time do you get to the chamber in the morning?
About 7 a.m.
What time do you leave?
That depends.
I understand. So Cheryl, so many of us these days are making a buck a nickel at a time, and you had to get really creative with non-dues revenue when the pandemic hit. Tell us what you were facing and what you did.
Just like all the other communities with the pandemic, the first thing that we were facing is trying to make sure that both of our members and our non-members were aware that the chamber was there for them, that we were in this together, and how we could help continue to drive people to the businesses during this time frame.
And so I understand that you created like a restaurant guide or a dining guide for truckers.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, it kind of came about because, like you mentioned in my introduction, Ed, that I was brought in specifically because the chamber needed a rebranding and a rebuilding in the community. Mm-hmm. So one of the supply chain trucking companies in the area, who has not been a chamber member for many years because they had lost faith and confidence, had reached out to me and said, we have truck drivers and they want a hot meal and we can't get them into the drive-thrus. What can you do to help? Which then I took it upon myself, and I was working from home at this point, to call every one of the restaurants in the community, both chamber members and non-members, and created a simple graphic that listed the business alphabetically and then had like a bullet point system where it was what their operation was. Were they open for in-restaurant dining? Were they open for drive-through only? If they had drive-through only, how could they accommodate the truckers? And that was really before the curbside really took off. And so we had some of our businesses jump up and say, hey, we got a trucker, have them call in. We will have someone out there to meet them with their food. We even had a brand new restaurant open up in the middle of the pandemic.
A brand new restaurant. That's
yeah.
Awesome. That's challenging, but awesome. So Okay, so you got this restaurant guide out there. How did you let people know? Uh,
Social media, as you said, my MBA is in marketing. So we have a weekly newsletter that we have over 400 subscribers on.
uh-huh.
And the four social media channels that we use the most, Facebook and Instagram are the biggest in this area, Southern Idaho. LinkedIn and Twitter is not quite as big. And so we targeted the social media outlets and blew it across them several times. And we ended up with over 13,000 engagements on Facebook alone, just on the restaurant guide.
13,000 engagements. So that means truckers and restaurants. Who was
People
engaging?
shared and reshared, they viewed it. It just picked up traction like you wouldn't believe. And so it was an ongoing thing during the lockdown because things would change. So we would go in and update it and rebroadcast it several times over.
So, okay, I guess this is kind of a silly question, but how is it benefiting the local businesses?
Well, obviously for the local businesses, specifically the people who thought that the restaurants were closed down, it kept the restaurants opened. Some of them did have to change their hours down and drop to lower hours and stuff, but it still kept them somewhat functioning. We didn't have anybody completely shut down.
Did you lose any businesses, any restaurants?
Thankfully, no, we have not.
That's great. That's great. Is it currently monetized? Is it generating revenue for the chamber?
Not at this point, because once again, the part of the strategy with my board of directors was once again rebuilding the confidence in the community, and we saw it as an opportunity to attract new businesses and pick up some of the ones who had lost faith and had dropped their membership, specifically like the company that reached out to me and said, hey, we need help, what can you do?
So it's really a program to benefit all business, particularly restaurants in your community that were the hardest hit. You saw a need, you talked to somebody who had a need, you created a solution for a problem, and it's created visibility and engagement for the chamber. How do you see it being monetized in the future, or can it be monetized?
Well, definitely it can be, because we can reach out to some of our members and some of the companies that benefited from this restaurant guide and approach them for sponsorship dollars so that we can continue to circulate it, throughout social media. We can have it printed and have it so that when people call for relocation packages, it's thrown in there as well.
Well, like you, I'm a marketing guy, and that is a beautiful, great message for when the pandemic is up. Well, any crisis, but when this pandemic is over, the chamber listened to the needs of the community, responded with a solution to a problem, and thankfully, well, hopefully no restaurants will be lost once this is all done. And you created a way to keep business flowing to restaurants. What a great success story for the chamber, and the chamber to toot its own horn. A lot of chambers don't like to toot its own horn, but that is a great story to tell. And that's a great membership tool to tell later.
Thank you, Ed.
So I understand that you created a revenue generating, non-dues revenue generating program, a 6-week online leadership series. 6 weeks. How did that come about?
How did that come about? For all the listeners and the viewers on this podcast, it came about when I first came to this chamber. I partnered with our local radio station, communication station, and I got onto 3 local stations doing what we call chamber chats. And chamber chats was an opportunity to go and talk on the 3 different stations and give a quick business tip, and then talk about chamber events and upcoming community events on the air. And with that, I'm always trying to find content for the chamber chat, something that was going to be relevant to the listeners. We really honed in on that the real need in this area was to target the soft leadership skills, those skills that the employers were saying that were missing in their new hires when it comes to active listening, how to network properly, and those type of stuff. So I'm constantly reading professional development leadership books. And in the process of doing that, I stumbled across a book that I absolutely fell in love with. It was a really fast, easy read, and thought this would be a fantastic way to monetize some things and offer this. I could do it in 6 weeks because the way the chapters were laid out, and model it almost like a book club, but more interactive. So we started marketing it. We called it Ignite the Leader in You. And the book that I came across It is called Spark: How to Lead Yourself and Others to Greater Success. This is my copy with all my notes. Well, if you can see that. And so I read it through once, thinking I was going to use it for the chamber chat. Liked the content so much, read it through a second time. Reached out to the authors and said, hey, I want to use this as a leadership series. Can you give us a discount on the books? And one of the authors emailed me back and said, we'd be happy to help you, and gave me a great discount. And then they had a slide deck prepared on their website that I then downloaded and added my own slides and additional content to it, marketed the heck out of it. We had one company send 6 people from their same organization to it. And to make it beneficial, we had included, they each got their own binder with my own marketing stuff on it, with the 6 weeks and the reading assignments and the handouts to start off with. Because when I said it was interactive, they had reading assignments. So I had all their email addresses. So before the first week, I emailed them all individually and said, we're so excited to have you in this program. Would you please read the introduction in chapter 1 and be prepared to talk about it at the training session? We partnered with the local library because that was when it was early fall, I guess, end of August, early September that we ran it. So we could meet in person, and I had 8 participants. So we partnered with the local library and used one of their meeting rooms and had the social distancing, and, we utilized the technology that way and got it started. So, like anything else, when you start a leadership series and you get a brand new group, the first couple of sessions are kind of quiet. People, aren't so willing to share, which is why you have to have your additional stories and experiences to kind of help, and questions to get them talking and speaking. By about halfway through the course, we were getting some great dialogue in the discussions to really help garner and help them not only develop these leadership skills, but one of the neat things about the handouts is it talks about, some of the handouts included things like for them to go back to their teams and say, okay, in this week's leadership thing, I just learned this concept, and then encourage them to talk about it within their organizations to try and be able to tackle some of the challenges that they are within their teams.
What kinds of businesses participated?
I had Southern Idaho is a huge egg area. We've got several dairy processors, and that includes great big companies that produce the whey that's used in your protein smoothie shakes, down to actual. We've got Darigold is a big company here. We've got a cheese manufacturer that actually makes cheese on site and ships it out. So one of the companies involved was one of these food industry ones in the dairy industry, and they had sent 6 people, and their HR person reached out to me and said, we don't have anything in this area. It's different than even what the Twin Chamber of Commerce is offering. At the price point of $180 per participant, they said, would you be willing to give us a discount? So I gave them 6 seats for the price of 5.
Wow. And 6 seats for the price of 5, and it made money, right?
It made money because the other company that participated was one of the big local banks. Had one of their marketing person in, and then one of the other cheese manufacturers had one of their marketing people in the session. And one of the reasons I like this book so much is because the chapters were so easy to read. It wasn't something that was going to, you end the workday and you're going, oh man, I've got to read my chapter for the session, and it's grueling and boring and you have a hard time staying focused on it. They're short, they've got great stories in them, and it actually made it fun to read. So
it sounds wonderful, and it sounds like something you found that book. But now tell me, 6 weeks. Now, normally these leadership series take months. I mean, I've seen them at major metro chambers and either other chambers are 6 months or so. Why 6 weeks, and how could you condense it all down to 6 weeks?
Well, like I said, it was the way that they had broken down their chapters. Like, for example, one of the chapters is on accountability, and it talks about how to empower your people to take ownership and be accountable, whether it's for successes or failures. And like I said, that was one of the, the huge things that I've noticed in my chamber chats that the industry, well, all industries were really needing, is really discussions on all of those soft skills. And how do we, translate that into, it's okay. It's okay to say I made a mistake. It's okay to say I failed. What can I learn from this? Because what they were noticing is, when we had started this a lot sooner, I had done a bunch of research on the multi-generational workplace. And we'd found out the disconnect with communication styles, and that some of the younger generations, meaning the millennials and the Gen Zers and stuff coming into the workforce, were so afraid of admitting to failure that it was causing roadblocks in businesses. And that's one of the reasons why the research is showing that they jump from job to job so quickly, because they don't want to be seen as failing. And how to get them to break past that, to see it as a growth opportunity.
And how many generations are in the workforce right now?
Right now, there's currently 5 different generations in the workplace, and it's the first time in history that they've had that many in one setting. And when you think about it, you've got your baby boomers, your Gen Xers, your millennials, your Gen Z, but you've also got a few of the traditionalists that are still in the, their mid 80s that are still in the workplace, and that's where that last generation sits in.
So there's, if I hear you correctly, there's kind of like a disconnect, or could be a disconnect in communication across all of those generations in the workplace.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you think about, you're taking your traditionalists and your baby boomers, technology wasn't even around then, and everything was handwritten, and communication was telephone and face-to-face. And then you get the brand new young generation, and I'm going to speak for my teenagers at home. Everything is texting, right? Heaven forbid you want eye contact. It just doesn't happen.
That's a skill, I think, that in the new young generation is being lost. And chambers do an excellent job of networking, but having that ability to connect, the knowledge of how to network, what is networking, and just that ability to have a one-on-one conversation. So through that leadership program, how does that address the leadership It's addressing those communication styles.
Let me give you an example of an experience I had when I was in North Dakota. We had a business after hours, and I had met this young sales person who had just come into her position, and she'd come into the chamber and wanted to be involved, and was trying to do that outreach. And so I invited her to come with me to the next business after hours. And that's key. First of all, if your business after hours are struggling with attendees, it's always the same people. You need to empower your people to say, I challenge you to invite somebody else to come with you. And so I get there because I'm really setting up, and I'm networking and visiting with people. And I see this young sales executive walk in the door and stand against the wall like a wallflower. And I walk up to her, and because we'd already started to build a relationship, I kind of hooked my arm through hers, and I said, no, Andy, this is not how you meet people. And I kind of led her to a table with a bunch of other people, the president of the local university and some of the other people who were having a conversation. I waited for them to have a pause when they made eye contact with me. And I said, I want you to meet Andy from such and such communications company. But that skill set with not knowing how to approach a person and say hello, she'd never been taught. And so once I guided her to that and taught her how easy it is, then the next business after hours, I noticed that she was much more comfortable in just going up and approaching people.
Okay, so what you're describing is like 2019, but in today's new reality, how do you address that with somebody in an online way or in a professional way online to reach out to people? Is there a way that you can train them through your leadership program or elsewhere to engage?
Well, yeah, we were talking before we started the podcast about how the Zoom meeting thing is really connecting people across the country in a way that we've never had it before. So once again, as you're listening and viewing and taking notes, if you are, then you're going to make a note of somebody else's, comments and say, hey, I want to meet up with that person because I like what they said. How can I reach out to you? We just utilize it in a variety of different ways. For, those who follow Frank Kenny on the Chamber Professionals on Facebook, you see a lot of people saying, can you send me information? Here's my email address. And I've been able to meet other chamber executives from across the country where we have our own separate meetings, because we found that there was a commonality in some of our challenges, and be able to pick each other's brains that way.
That makes sense. So getting back to the leadership program, it's a 6-week program.
Yep.
Because it's 6 weeks, how often do you see yourself doing that during the course of the year?
I would love to initiate it 3 times a year to start with. I have had some of the other businesses express interest on doing a special one in-house just for their company. But once again, with the pandemic and with them restricting down how many people can be in their conference rooms and changing their shifts around, that hasn't happened yet. But I have had interest from 2 other big dairy manufacturers that's what they want to do.
Okay, so people in the audience, who wants to know more about this 6-week online leadership series? If you want to, type "I do" in the comment sections, and we'll work something out with Cheryl, because she seems to have put this together into a program. And if that would be a benefit to you, again, just type in "I do," let us know. So Cheryl, with your marketing background, you know how important it is to be visible, but visibility doesn't directly convert to cash right away. What does visibility look like for a business? And more importantly, what does visibility look like for a chamber?
Well, visibility for a business, first of all, is getting their name out there, and so that people recognize their logo and their name. When we've had businesses first come into the area, so let me pick on the company, the restaurant that just opened up in the middle of the pandemic. They had the most brilliant marketing strategy I'd ever seen. They targeted only all on social media because everything was shut down. And they would do little videos and all sorts of things. They instantly opened up when they actually had their official opening with curbside pickup only. And it was really about getting involved and getting their name out there a lot. One of the advantages, as you know, as chamber professionals is the value of being a chamber member is the fact that people will come to chamber members first. Mm-hmm. And doing what you can as a chamber member, as a chamber, to highlight the businesses in your area. And we've done that with different ways. I have a program called Business of the Week, where we highlight one of our members each week. We do a picture with them. They've got this big sign they get to proudly display. It's kind of like a traveling trophy. They also get mentioned on the 3 radio shows that I'm on. One of the radio stations will even do a free interview for them. So there's all different ways that the chamber can help promote the business, so to help give them visibility, so that somebody in the community goes, oh yeah, I heard about that business, but where did I hear it from?
So with that Business of the Week, I understand that you pivoted from Business of the Week to Industry of the Week. Why?
Because during the lockdown, we couldn't get into the actual businesses. A lot of the businesses wouldn't let me in, or, vice versa. My board president said, I don't want you out in the community. We want to keep you safe. So we converted it to the Industry of the Week. And so the first one that we targeted were the supply chain, specifically the truck drivers, to say, hey, we did this special graphic saying, we want to do a shout out to our superheroes, and this week's superheroes are our truck drivers in the supply chains, because without them, we wouldn't be able to be up and functioning, regardless of what your business is, because you've still got to get product shipped in and shipped out.
Got it. Now, prior to the pandemic starting, when we were still doing in-person events, you had talked about changing your chamber lunches from being to becoming more like content value chamber lunches. When we get back to doing that kind of stuff, this is very interesting. Can you tell us what that content value chamber lunch is?
Well, yeah, when I first got here, once again, it was, like I said, a small bedroom community, and their chamber lunches were really poorly attended. We're talking 10 or less people. Most of them were chamber ambassadors that attended. And it's like, this isn't very good, because what they would do is they would target a chamber member who would come in and talk about their business. Well, that's fine and good to learn more about the business, but it wasn't attracting the right type of people to grow the lunches and to really make a profit off of the lunches. So once again, I copied some of the things that I had done in North Dakota. And one of the first things that I introduced, and I know a lot of you other chambers do this, was I did a state of the city. They hadn't done one in this bedroom community before. So, had reached out and he got a hold of the city administrator, and the chief of police, and we really, targeted on certain things to have this presentation. And so that was the first one. And then from there, it kind of snowballed and realized that people want good quality content. Some of our better attended ones was when we had a presentation of this was when people start coming to me. I don't have to go to speakers, they come to me. So our local public health district found out that I was doing these lunches, and they said, we want to do a presentation on vaping. I thought, perfect, let me see what I can slot you in. Well, we had the guy come in and do a presentation on vaping and inform people on really what we had no idea on. Huge success. Then that snowballed into getting a hold of the chief of police and having him do one on drugs in the community, because once again, a lot of people don't realize what's in their own community. Our State of the City, we had so many speakers lined up that we broke it apart and then did one called State of Education, where we had the local college president in, we had the superintendent for the school district in, we had some of the private school principals talk about what's going on in their educational institutions and where their growth is going. And once again, those are much better attended. So it really is, once you do the first one or two, people will start coming to you when the community realizes that, hey, these chamber lunches are doing something that I'm going to get value out of, like you said.
Makes sense. So speaking of going back to in person, you did something recently. You had a 100th anniversary banquet that was in person during the pandemic. And I understand you made money from that. But tell us a little bit about that, and why did you choose to go and do that in person, and how did you keep people safe?
Well, first of all, to get a little bit of history, the 100th anniversary banquet was scheduled to run the night that the state was shut down.
Oh boy.
So you come into work that morning, and the first thing you have to do is start canceling everything and making sure that all the attendees know what's going on. We'd had a biggest pre-registration ever in the history of this small community. Partly, I think it was because of the work they'd seen the chamber doing, and that we had been changing that image, but also because it was the 100th anniversary. People were very gracious and understanding. So pause that, fast forward it 6 months later, when you're going, when are we going to do this banquet? How are we going to get these awards out? We randomly selected a date the very first weekend in October, which was a good choice for us because once again, we were open up to stage 3 at that point. And we had, put things in place where we had little hand sanitizer bottles, 2 on every table. We had the masks available. We encourage people to wear masks in. They just had the tables more separate, apart from each other. But because of the number of attendees that we had, we'd even picked up additional registrations because we rebranded it as well. When we first started branding it for the March event, we had it a different name and a different theme. And to make it something fresh, we completely rebranded it and said, okay, we're still going to do this. And we combined, because we had to cancel the golf scramble, we had to cancel another big fundraising event. We combined a couple of events into this one and said, okay, it's not only the awards banquet this time, but it's also going to be a auction and fundraiser. And we partnered with somebody else and got in some really big ticket items, like some special trips and things like that. We had 227 people pre-registered and about 200 show up.
Well, that's awesome. And during this time, so it sounds like people really are wanting to get back to the old ways of doing things. And well, kudos to you for being able to do that safely. So it sounds like so many chambers, you were faced with a challenging situation. You took an entrepreneurial approach. You created something new. You created new opportunities. And there are opportunities now to monetize them, to generate more money out of them, and to do them more frequently, which is absolutely incredible. So what are your thoughts briefly about generating both dues and non-dues revenue going forward?
Well, your dues, revenue, first of all, as all the chambers know, your dues revenue really is your bread and butter with your operating costs, for covering your operating costs, right? When it comes to your non-dues revenue, the biggest thing is mixing it up and keeping things fresh. When I was in North Dakota, the focus was to really change on community events and to really pull that community sense into the businesses, which benefits the businesses because that's how they get their sponsorship out and their name out, right? And so when I was in North Dakota, we had retired some tired old annual events that just weren't producing very well, and then had created brand new ones that became wildly successful. And it's just a matter of having people overcome that fear factor. First of all, you've got those silos, you've got those people in every community who's like, it's never been done before. We've always done it this way. We can't change. And it's getting the partnership in with the right people who will help support you in making that change. In North Dakota, we started a Festival of Trees, and one of my greatest supporters was the brand new university president who had come in from out of state. And he was a huge supporter. He was also new. He wasn't one of the old boys club, and was able to really help push and support things moving forward. And some of them are going, well, let me try. If I fail, we fail, but let us try.
Makes sense. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for your insight and sharing your experience with us. Judy Hayes, who's been monitoring our Q&A. Judy, do we have any questions for Cheryl?
One question that came up, and you may have covered this, Cheryl, but I'll ask it again, is can you share some of the things you do for retention?
I don't know about the other chambers, but we have been very blessed. I've been in the process of getting all of my dues renewed for this year, and I haven't had any loss come out. The biggest thing with retention, and like I said, when I came to this chamber in Southern Idaho, it was a matter of rebuilding it, is making sure that if you have to rework your membership packages, and that's one of the things I did, is I switched from paying by employee count to a tier membership thing where we added in additional value. So some of the value that we added in on one of the membership tiers was we went to a marketing membership tier, which is about a $600 a year investment, but we threw in X amount of chamber luncheon free tickets with it. So depending on how your chamber is marketing and your events, what can you do that's going to add value in the different tiers where they're going to say, hey, I think this is great, and we don't have a problem paying this higher tier price because we're getting these extra benefits in it. And some of them you have to offer for free to begin with to get people excited about it.
Well, Cheryl, thank you very much for being here today, and thank you to Judy Hayes for assisting. I'm Ed Burzminski for Chamber Marketing Partners, www.chambermarketingpartners.com, helping chambers of commerce generate substantial non-dues revenue from publications.